Greetings everyone, I'm Kevin, and let's talk about my stats for June and the first 6 months of the year. I always love looking back on the stats just because they always tell a different story from my reading experience. If I feel like, oh my god, I had such a bad reading month, then I can just look at the stats and be like, oh shoot, it was incredible, you know? And that's kind of how I feel when I compile the list of everything for the past 6 months. But without further ado, the amount of books I read in June was 12 books. And in the first 6 months, I read 87 books. And out of these 87, 60 books I owned. So I read 60 books that I own myself, which is also something that I want to keep track on. The fact that I don't read, that the scale tips over for books I own and not books I read otherwise, like online, audiobooks, ebooks, library, I want to make, a dent in the books that I own myself. So I love that I read 60 books that I own myself, so that's nice. And then we move on to pages. In June, I read 4,129 pages, which sounds a lot. And for the first 6 months, I read a total of 26,730 pages, which is incredible. That is a lot. And then the question is, what is the average amount of pages? For June, the average amount of pages was 344. So on average, the books I read were 344 pages long, which is kind of weird because I read a book that was over 800 pages in June. I don't really understand how that worked. And then for the first 6 months, the only 6 months of the year so far, the average page number is 307 pages, so a lot less, which I guess makes sense because I've read a few graphic novels, plays, and stuff like that. So it makes sense that it's around 300, even though it feels very strange because I read a lot of books that were very much over 300 pages, like 500 pages, 700 pages, 800 pages. So for it to still stay on 307 as the average is very strange to me. And then the longest book that I read is for both, just for June and for the entire 6 months up to July. And it is Priory of the Orange Tree, which was 804 pages long. I do not count the part of the book that is not the book. So the kind of appendix with explanations of characters, history, stuff like that, I don't count that for the page number of the book. Just to kind of if anyone is confused, wait, but Priory is longer than 804. Yes, technically it is, but I only count the book, and the book ends on page 804. So that's why I only count 804 pages. The shortest book I read in June was 192 pages long, and it was When My Name Was Kyoko. Absolutely adore that book. And the shortest book I read in the first 6 months was a play by William Shakespeare, and it's A Midsummer Night's Dream, and it was 26 pages long. The edition that I have was 26 pages long, so extremely short. Then we move on to stars. In June, I gave out 46 stars. I gave out 4 5 stars, 2 4 stars, and 6 3 stars. I didn't give out a single 1 star or a 2 star in June, which I always love when that happens. And for the first 6 months of the year, I gave out 346 stars. In a total, I gave out 31 5 stars, 34 4 stars, 16 3 stars, 3 2 stars, and 1 1 star. Again, it's very strange the fact that I gave out twice as many 5 and 4 stars individually. Then I gave out 3 stars. Like 3 stars was 16, and 16 times 2 is 32. Yeah, it's 32. And I gave out 31 5 stars and 34 4 stars. So those are kind of like twice the amount of 3 stars that I gave out. And that is so weird to me. That the most common star rating that I gave out was 4 stars. How? And then average star rating in June was 3.8. And the average star rating for the first 6 months were 3.9. Very, very high average star ratings. Almost a 4 as an average is so weird. I love it. I absolutely love it. But it's still extremely weird. And the next thing I'm going to talk about is genres. So for June, I read 5 genres. I read 5 contemporaries, 3 historical fiction, 2 fantasy novels, 1 paranormal, and 1 science fiction. And for the first 6 months, I read 36 contemporaries, 12 fantasy novels, 10 romance novels, 10 historical fiction, and 7 science fiction. I feel like my reading so far is predominantly contemporary. And I should also say, like, for this contemporary is kind of, I write contemporary instead of literary fiction. Because it's literary fiction but set in our contemporary society. So I write contemporary instead of literary fiction, but that's what it is, essentially. And then we're on to format. So for audiobooks, I read 8 audiobooks in June. And I listened to 54 audiobooks in the first 6 months of 2021. Yeah. In physical books, I read 6 physical books in June. And I read 64 physical books in the first half year of 2021. And these, I should also say, is physical book. It's not, I read the entire book physically. It doesn't have to be. And the same thing for audiobook. It can be that I read 1 chapter audiobook, the rest in physical, vice versa. It just means that for part or most of the book, I read as in that format. So even if I only read 1 chapter audiobook, I still read it as an audiobook, no matter how little or no matter how much. So that's just explaining that a little bit. And the next format is ebook. I read 1 ebook in all of June. I read 7 in the first 6 months of the year. I don't usually read ebook, which you notice very clearly here. The next thing is language. I always think it's fun to look at language just because I am multilingual, and I always challenge myself to read more in multiple languages to kind of entertain the different languages so I don't lose any like linguistic abilities, I guess. I don't know. But for language in June, I read 11 books in English and 1 book in Swedish. And for the first 6 months of 2021, I read 80 books in English, 9 books in Swedish, and 1 book in German. That is going to change in July because I'm counting on reading 3 books in German and 1 book in Swedish. I just realized. Anyways, we're moving on to countries visited. This is going to be quite a long list for the first 6 months. But let's begin with June. What countries did I visit in June? In order of appearance in the book, I have visited Japan, South Korea, Nigeria, the US, Sweden, Singapore, China, and Hong Kong. And then we're moving on to the countries I visited in the first 6 months. This is a long list, as I said. We have the US, Ireland, South Korea, Ghana, Niger, Mali, Libya, Italy, UK, Sweden, Dominican Republic, Russia, Norway, Israel, Palestine, Finland, France, Poland, Germany, Nigeria, Shanghai, South Africa, Vietnam, Malta, Ukraine, Japan, Singapore, China, and Hong Kong. So those are all the countries that I have visited in books in 2021 so far. And so we can see here that the continent that I visited the most was the Americas. Just to make it simple for myself, I don't divide, for the sense of this, I don't divide the Americas into like North America, Central America, and South America or something like that. Even though in Sweden we consider North America and South America to be two different continents, I wanted, like, for simplicity's sake for myself, to divide them according to North and South America. The reason for that is because I was confident that Dominican Republic was South American. And because I read Clap When You Land, which was half of the book was set in the US, North America, and the other half was set in Dominican Republic, I felt like, how am I gonna do when this book is set in North and South America? Spoiler alert, Dominican Republic is not part of South America, which I did not know. And so because of that book, I decided, hey, I'm just gonna do the Americas for simplicity's sake, count all of it. North America, Central America, South America, all of that is the Americas now, to make it simple for myself, which I do realize I didn't have to do, but we're sticking with it. So I read 39 books for the Americas, which was just 5 books over what I read for Europe, which was 34 books. And I read 16 books for Asia and 7 books for Africa, which I think this kind of gives a nice view for me of what I just think this was kind of like fun to see that, because sometimes, I feel like I read predominantly US books, but looking at this, I see that I read like not a big chunk, but a chunk of Asian literature as well, which I read a lot of Korean literature, which I am well aware of. And I should also say that for these books, I don't count if a character is Asian living in the US. It counts as the US, it doesn't count as Asian. And for example, Last Story of Min Ali, which is a very small part of that book, is set in Korea before she immigrated to the US. I count that book as the US. So like identity is not part of it. Like I could do a big like this kind of circle diagram with the identities or like the ethnicities and nationalities of the main characters. I didn't do that. I didn't like think ahead to do that. I just wanted to kind of see what continent did I visit so far in 2021. And it was the Americas, and then in second place Europe, and then at 16 books, which I still think is good. I mean, it's half almost of what I read for Europe and the Americas. It's Africa that I feel like I need to get better at, and then Oceania didn't even make the list. So, well, then that was it for this little stats video. I am always going out of these very kind of happy, I feel like, because especially now when I do a stats for the entire first 6 months, it's like, oh my god. I read that many books. Like I read 87 books in the first 6 months of the year. I read a lot of pages, I gave out a lot of high ratings, and I visited a lot of countries. So I'm very happy about all of that. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, and please let me know how you did. How many countries did you visit? What is your average star rating and page number? How many books did you read? Please let me know. Please let me know down below. And I will see all of you next time. Good reading. Bye.